regular meeting of the North St. Paul Planning Commission for May 6th to order. Did you want to do the roll call, Lisa?
Yes. Chair Elaine Barton.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Lees is an excused absent. Commissioner Eric Brenna.
Present.
Commissioner Rick Gelbman.
Here.
Vice Chair John Mungy.
Here.
Council Liaison Lisa Wong.
Here.
Commissioner Andrew Weiss may be a few minutes late. And Commissioner Alan Warm.
Might be late. We'll put it that way.
Or he wrapped up his business last week before we even got here.
Did it all on his own.
Yep. He gets a lot of stuff done that way. Just not, we don't get in his way.
Yeah. At any rate, so first item is to adopt the agenda. Do I have a motion to do that?
So
moved.
Motion by John, second by Rick.
Okay.
All those in favor will say aye when Lisa calls the roll. If you're not in favor, you'll say nay.
Chair Elaine Barton.
Aye.
Commissioner Eric Brenna.
Aye.
Commissioner Rick Gelbman.
Aye.
Vice Chair John Mungy.
Aye.
Commissioner Andrew Weiss. He's not here yet.
Okay, so we have all ayes.
We do.
That's adopted. Next item is the approval of the minutes from the April 1st meeting. Anybody have any additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Eric. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by John. All those in favor?
Rick.
Oh, Rick, are you the one who said second?
Yeah.
I did, Rick.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought I saw John's face light up.
It's me.
You know, the box lights up when someone talks. Anyway, so Lisa will take the roll. Say aye if you are in favor and nay if you're not.
Chair Elaine Barton.
Aye.
Commissioner Eric Brenna.
Aye.
Commissioner Rick Gelbman.
Aye.
Vice Chair John Mungy.
Aye.
Oh, that's all of us. That's great.
I know. It's so short.
I know. I keep waiting for more. All righty, those are approved. Then we're down to meeting open to the public. So if there's anyone here who wants to present something to the commission regarding something that's not on the agenda, now would be the time to do that. So if you are interested in providing some input, please raise your hand and Lisa or Eric will unmute you.
We have John. John, you should be unmuted now.
John Schmall, 2750 Chisholm Avenue. I have a question on the procedures, item number 7. Is that information that's attached to the packet considered to be at a level of perfection that any input or errors found by citizens are not wanted at this time because there's no open meeting to accept anything?
Well, we had the public hearing last month, but we did table the discussion based upon some input from, might have been you and certainly from commissioners. So we'll be picking up the discussion again. Are you going to have input that you'll want to provide at that on that topic?
You should know that that question isn't needed.
Well, I'm just
Yes.
clarifying. Okay, so we'll just make a little note of that when we get to that item on the agenda.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jen. Anyone else?
I will just note we have Paul Anderson in attendance as an attendee, but that is an item on the agenda.
Okay. No other attendees?
No other attendees other than John, so that takes
Alrighty. Then we'll move on to our public hearing section. We have two public hearings this evening. The first is for a variance to construct a screened porch within the shoreland setback at 2612 Swan. So before we start on the public hearings, I'll just quickly review the process in case anybody's not.
Chair Barton, just if I could, I think that's a good idea, but at least I don't know if you've seen Andrew Wise has now shown up in the attendee.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Chair.
Just got, yeah.
No, I don't have all the participants on my screen. There he is.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry for my lateness. Looking at a daycare today, so a little bit late. Sorry about that.
Okay. Well, we're in the public hearing section of the meeting, so I was just going to review the process for those who might not be familiar with it. The first thing we have is a staff report that will be presented usually by our planner, Eric. And then commissioners are free to ask any specific questions they might have about the report. And the applicant is given an opportunity to provide any additional input that they wish to. The public portion of the hearing is then open, and anybody who's in attendance who wants to provide input on the request is able to do so at that time. When all that input is received, then we'll close the public hearing and the commission will discuss it and make their recommendation. So that's the process. So we'll start out with the staff report by planner Eric.
Thank you, Chair Barton. I just want to confirm that you can see the presentation. All right, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. This is a setback variance from the ordinary high water level mark at 2612 Swan Avenue East. The property is shown here in red. You can see that Swan Avenue creates kind of a circle with Poplar Avenue there. You see that most of the houses on Swan Avenue are set back from Swan about the same distance from each other, but the depth of the lots and the location of the ordinary high water level mark varies per lot. So we'll go over that in the next couple slides. Existing condition, the property currently has an existing deck that is within the 75-foot setback of the ordinary high water level mark. The property is zoned R1 and is within the shoreline overlay district. Just to maybe expand a little bit from the PowerPoint, but included in your staff report, a deck is a exception that can be located closer to the shore or the ordinary high water level mark than the principal structure. The applicant is requesting to construct a screened porch that includes a roof over the deck. That would make it part of the principal structure, and that is the reason for the variance request. So here is the location of the porch as it stood when the applicant submitted this application. That's the area that would be enclosed into the porch, and we'll have a diagram more of the roof plan a little later. So the principal structures on Silver Lake have a ordinary high water level mark or setback from the OHWL of 75 feet or the average of the two adjacent properties. In this case, the two properties next to him are farther than 75 feet away. So the 75 foot is the largest, or is the one to use. They are proposing 57 feet, and I'll discuss that when we get to our recommendation here a little bit. So there are 5 variance criteria that need to be reviewed, and it's the variances are more restrictive or more difficult to get than other permits like conditional use permits. So all 5 conditions need to be met for a variance to be approved. If any one of the 5 is deemed to not be in compliance with that criteria, then the variance should be denied. So what I'm going to provide are 5 analysis of these criteria, and then during your discussion, you could have discussion on any or each of these 5. But the first is that the variance is in harmony and consistent with the general purpose and intent of the comprehensive plan and this chapter. So the 2040 comprehensive plan guides this property for low density residential. The use of a single family home with a screened porch is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Existing use and proposed use is consistent with the R1 zoning district. So the second criteria is that the variance will not adversely affect the health, safety, or general welfare of the city. The proposed project is to construct the screen porch, which staff has recommended does not negatively impact those factors. And the single family house currently has this deck, and they're looking to reconstruct it in the same footprint. So the third standard is that a variance is due to special conditions applying to the structure or the land in question, and that the property and this property does not generally apply to other lands or structures in the district or the vicinity. So we have 2 districts here. We have the R1 zoning district, and we have the shoreland district. There are 2 standards to measure setback, one being 75 foot from the ordinary high water level mark, the other one being the average distance to 2 homes. Looking at the other houses along this block, you could come up with different minimum variant or minimum setbacks, looking at how the different properties are viewed. The property for 2594 could be looked at as the average setback could be about 45 feet. So it varies. The different lands in this vicinity vary. The fourth one is the variance is the minimum variance due to the necessary. The deck exists today. The applicant is not requesting to expand the deck. There is I'll mention at the end, there is a slight issue that has arisen with that. The minimum variance is to enclose the deck with a screened porch. And then the fifth is that the practical difficulties are caused by the strict application of the code, and that the property owner proposes a use that is reasonable, that in a reasonable manner is not permitted by the zoning district. So he is proposing to enclose that deck into a porch, which is not allowed by the zoning district. Plight of the landowners due to circumstances unique to the property. We talked about the other lots along that block in that area. The variance, if granted, would not alter the essential character of the locality. As we looked at the other houses, some of them are located closer than this one would be if this variance was approved. Economic considerations alone is not the practical difficulty. He still has a single family house before and after the variance, so it's not an economic consideration. And then the last one is the variance is consistent with officially adopted plans and overlays. We talked about earlier that it's the single family use is consistent with the comprehensive plan designation and with the zoning district. We did receive an email from the DNR area hydrologist, and this is a quote regarding this particular application. That he was contacted by a North St. Paul resident, and that when he looked at this plan, he does not plan on commenting on this application. Now, following the action from the City Council, we have 10 days to provide that to the DNR, but this is his written comment regarding this application. So here is the building plan that was submitted for the screen porch. The existing deck is a little old, so he also requested a permit to replace his deck. And, that makes sense. If he's going to make an investment of enclosing it within the screen porch, he wants to make sure that his existing deck is in good condition. The existing deck is an exception from the shoreline setback. So, he met all the standards to replace his deck, and we issued a building permit. When his builder constructed that deck, when they were putting in the footings, they hit a rock that required them to move the footing, and it decreased the setback by 1 foot. Now, what I had put in my recommendation before, we just learned that Monday or Tuesday. When we put the packet out, I already had put in a recommendation of 57 feet. I commonly do that because something comes up during construction. They submitted a set of plans that said plus or minus 58 feet. I wanted to give them a little bit of leeway just in case something does come up with construction. So I had recommended that the principal structure be located no closer than 57 feet from the ordinary high water level mark. Their deck and the modification they needed to make that work still meet this recommendation. Just wanted to make your attention that during the reconstruction of the deck, the contractor located it 1 foot closer to the property or to the high water level mark. So with that, I would stand for any questions or comments about this presentation. Chair Barton, maybe I'll start with, it is easier sometimes if I don't share my screen to see other people talk. Would you like me to keep the presentation up or take it down for now?
Well, I think as long as you can bring up a particular page, if somebody wants you to, I think you can take it down.
Okay, I'll do that.
I agree. It is easier when you can see other people. Does anybody have any questions on the staff report? I do.
I guess I do. I guess I'd ask Eric for some additional detail on special conditions that apply to the structures and the setback situations, and clarification there. I'm sorry, it's kind of a vague question, but I just feel like I'd like a little more information about how you got to where that is. I didn't see the 45, for instance, I didn't see the 45 feet that you referred to at all, and how you're coming to the conclusion that you are.
Well, I'm going to have to, I think.
Okay. As well as the 70 foot that's listed here for 2612 Swan and the 57 foot that you're recommending.
Okay. So apologize here. That's not the right one. This is the right one.
Did that come from the average because the one was at 30 feet and the other one was at 90 feet or something like that?
That's exactly right. So I assume it's, Commissioner Geldman, this is the particular one you are querying?
Yes.
So this is the addresses in order, basically from southwest to northeast. The property in question is 2612. Currently, the setback from the principal structure, because the deck doesn't count as a principal structure, the setback from the principal structure currently is about 70 feet. Now, the setback is either 75 feet or the average of the two adjacent properties. Well, the two adjacent properties to this one are either 95 feet or 80 feet, so the average would be 87 and a half. So the 75 applies for that property. That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. So if we're looking at 7594, the second from the bottom, the 7592 is about 30 feet. And that's because that property, the shoreline comes around at a corner, and the closest is actually as that shoreline comes around the corner. But the other adjacent property is 2598, and that's about 60 feet. So adding the 30 feet and 60 feet together is 90. Dividing that in half to come up with the average is 45.
Okay.
And then, you could do the same with if we did 2598, the one on basically the southwest is 60 feet. The one to the northeast would be 80 feet. You add them together, it's 140. You divide that in half, that setback would be 70. So
right.
Different houses, depending on which ones are the adjacent properties, have different setbacks. And these are the houses in the vicinity of this property.
Okay. Then how does the 58 feet or 57 feet come into play at this point?
It is the minimum request. The request is to enclose the porch, particularly after the reconstruction. The porch is 57, and that would be the minimum.
So in essence, this is a 13-foot variance that's being requested.
Actually, I would say it's a 22-foot variance.
Oh, 13. Oh,
well, it would be 50.
Where do you get
57 from?
57.
Oh, I guess you're right. It would be. I'm doing my math wrong. It would be
17.
Yeah.
Right? 17. Okay.
Or 18 with the.
Or 18. Yeah.
With the 57. 57. Sorry. Yep. 18 foot. So just
okay, but
so these are all good
had,
questions.
Mm-hmm.
This is one way to make a finding. You're ultimately making a recommendation on what are the findings of each individual ones, and then ultimately the city council would make that final determination on all three of these findings.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, before you leave this screen,
Mm-hmm.
the list of properties, 2598, then it has 2594, but there is no 2594. I think that's supposed to be 2584, because 2592 is the one adjacent to 2598. 2584.
Okay, I'll have to believe you. I went to the GIS and just measured down the four. If I got the addressing of those four incorrect, I apologize. But it is the four, the four houses as you head southwest.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying that it pays not to have an address that doesn't exist.
I can appreciate that.
That was my only point. The order isn't as important as just making sure you've got it does matter if you're creating an average, but we certainly don't want to have an incorrect address.
I can appreciate that.
I just have a quick question. Were there addresses, higher numbered addresses, or do you just pick, were these kind of characteristic of the same lot? I just noticed you had the one that was a higher number, but it looks like it kind of was that Poplar Avenue just sort of swoops around. Is there a reason you didn't include those properties for comparison?
Not necessarily. I think I would have came up with a very similar conclusion was really the reason why I didn't.
Sure.
You know, the next one to the northeast looks like it's set back even further maybe than the one directly adjacent. But then as you start coming around the corner, you know, this one and the next three seem to be maybe even closer than
Looks
the
like
one
it's pretty
here.
tight
So
over there, yeah.
it was more. It seemed to be a similar pattern as the other direction. So
Comparables, as it were.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's a
Thank
strange
you.
street that they got
It-
Poplar and Swan in the middle. I'm actually on that triangle. That's my house, and that we're the end of Poplar, and then it's Swan. It's for such a small street with two names. It's a little crazy.
Cool.
Yeah.
but
No,
I hope that explains kind of. It seemed to be a sampling that was consistent through the name.
Yeah, no, it was just a simple question of what's your criteria for how you pick comparable houses. So no, that was very informational. Thank you.
Of course, with the lake,
Mhm.
that's because it's not even. So it'd be a whole nother thing is the body of water. They can't split it, so it has to follow the shoreline.
I'm hearing two different criteria here, and maybe you can clarify this, Eric. One is the adjacency, and I assume that means the immediate houses on either side of the property in question.
That is the standard that the variance is being requested from. That is the standard for the setback is adjacent.
Okay,
But the
And then
criteria
the other-
for granting a variance isn't the same as the standard.
okay. And that is based on the character of the neighborhood, what it's like for other properties nearby, not necessarily adjacent, but nearby. Is that accurate?
Well, that's my interpretation. If this criteria was meant to be that it should be generally be like other adjacent parcels, then maybe the word here should have been the district or adjacent, but the words are district or vicinity.
You can take this
Okay, thank you. That's a good clarification for me. Go ahead, Elaine.
I was just going to say you can take the screen sharing down, Eric.
Oh, okay, sure.
So just to clarify, because I want to make sure I understood what you said. Is this a request to vary from the actual language of the averaging setback standard?
It is a variance to the entire language, the entire standards. I guess I'm saying both standards, the entire language of the setback from the ordinary high water level mark. So it's not just a variance from the 75-foot or just a variance from the average. It's a variance from how the shoreland determines. And the result is you come up with a new setback standard. And the request is a new standard of 57 feet.
Okay.
Mhm.
And that's not something, that's typically, if you're going to create a new standard, you typically do that by rewriting the code, by amending the code.
And that's essentially what we're doing. The amendment would be for this property, the shoreland setback would be 57 feet.
I know, but we don't amend code for one property. We amend code because then it applies the same way to all similarly situated properties. I mean,
If
that's,
you did a text amendment, right?
yes, and that's what I'm saying. That's generally how you amend a standard,
Mhm.
because it changes it changes the requirement entirely.
Right. But that was not what the applicant requested. The applicant.
No, I know, but it's just what I'm trying to get clear in my mind.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on the staff report? If not, then if the applicant wants to provide any additional information, he could raise his hand and Lisa could unmute him if he wants to.
Lisa has given him the ability to unmute, and he looks like he just did. So.
Did you want to add anything, Paul?
Well, I guess I agree with everything that's been said. I appreciate your consideration of this, but just to let you know that this is something that our son, one of our sons, is going to move into this property eventually when we decided that we've had enough work here. So it was his request that we try to get a screen porch, and they have no intention of doing any more than that with a screen porch with a roof. And so they have plenty of square footage here for the two of them. So there's no plan to add on anymore. Just to give you a little history of this place, it doesn't really change anything, but since I'm interested in the history of the town, I know that this house was built in 1941, and that was right after they started developing this whole property of Poplar and Swan Avenue. And the house was built on a 50-foot lot by the firemen of North St. Paul. And they built it as a fundraiser. I don't think they succeeded in it because they sold raffle tickets. And I heard indirectly that they lost money on the deal, but they raffled it off, and the person who won it in the raffle was from Montemita and didn't want to move here. So he sold it to my father-in-law at that time. And it was just a 50-foot lot. And my father-in-law added on another 50 feet later on and built the addition on the south side of the house. So just a little sidelight to let you know about the history. And so I appreciate your consideration. I don't have anything else that I really need to add right now. So
could I ask just one quick question, Paul? When was
Sure.
the deck put on?
that was 50 years ago.
Oh,
And,
sure.
so it was in 1979.
79?
I think so. Is that 50 years?
I don't know. I can't.
Anyway.
I need my calculator for math nowadays.
It's 42 years, I think, because I was born in 79. So I can tell you.
That makes me feel better. Yeah. Anyway, I know it's 50 years, so it was earlier than I thought. So, and the deck we found, we did take it apart, and we found that it was in bad shape and was kind of a health hazard anyway. So we really needed to do something, but didn't realize that we needed it so badly.
Okay. Okay, I'm just curious. Thank you, Paul.
Sure.
All righty, then we'll move on to open the public hearing at 7:09. So if there's anybody who wishes to provide any input on this request, now is the time to do it. Raise your hand if you do it.
It
Lisa,
looks like John Schmall, his hand has been raised, but John, I've unmuted you if you do have something to say.
Lisa, always.
Always. We know that. Okay, go ahead, John.
Thank you. Any reason that the DNR was not consulted in this process?
I can add some information to that, but usually we get all the questions and we address them at once. So do you have any other questions?
Boy, was that a put down. Anyway, what I'll add to that question that I contacted the DNR, and I am the person that they referenced as being contacted. or being a person contacting them. And it was told to me that that is an automatic when a variance is requested when it comes to shoreland. You contact the DNR. No ifs, ands, or buts. So why we didn't, I'll be waiting for the answer to that particular question that I had. Now, there is an outfit called Google that I queried the word adjacent. And Google says next to or adjoining something else. Now you can take that and it's pretty clear as to what adjacent is. It isn't 4 houses away. And in my response, or the response to me that from the person that I contacted in the DNR, he basically said, this wouldn't fly. But in the long run of this process, if they were asked, they would not have had any negative comments because it is an existing deck on a footprint that really they wouldn't be concerned about. So there's a lot of razzle dazzle in this to try to, provide proof as to why the variance should be given approval when if you would have contacted the DNR, they would have said, go for it. But that is adjacent, again, means adjacent. And this is hearsay because you don't have the email that I got from the individual that I talked to in the DNR on this subject of adjacent. And the individual said, I don't know what they're doing, but it's irrelevant to try to move away from what really is adjacent. And in my own estimation on this thing, if you were allowed to pick and choose the houses with the setbacks that you wanted to make sure that the variance would be approved, you could have a house a couple blocks away if adjacent didn't mean adjacent. So I think there's a lot of work put into this thing in order to, again, come up with a smoke screen, and there wasn't a necessity for it. But I hope in the future that, and anything like this that comes up, that you do what the DNR expects the city to do, and that is to contact them and get their input on something like this. Because myself, as a double shoreline owner, one being on Casey Sewer Water Containment Area and one being on the big lake up north, I live very closely to these requirements that have to do with shorelands. And they're usually not played with. They are followed to a T. So that's all I have.
Thank you, John. I think, it wasn't until the previous update of code that we even had the shoreland overlay, or really the water protection ordinances in our code. They did exist, but we had not included them in our code. So each time we get one of these, it's an opportunity for a learning. So thanks for your input. Is there, I don't think there's anybody else. Has anybody else joined us, Lisa?
Yes, there is one other person that is identified as John Fax that is listed in the attendees, but he has not raised his hand. But maybe by me mentioning this, if John Fax, does want to weigh in, could you please raise your hand? And he has not.
Okay. Alrighty, then I'll close the public hearing at 7:15 and we'll discuss it here.
Chair Barton, I can address the public hearing notice portion if you'd want.
Yes.
So we are new permitting process software, and we unfortunately are always discovering how to improve that process. We discovered a previous a failure to completely issue a public hearing notice, so we just published for the next meeting after that. So we've added now in OpenGov a public hearing checklist that the application will not go forward until I review the application and provide Lisa a determination of whether a public hearing notice is needed or not. That will allow me to also put in notes of this is in the shoreline district and needs to be added to the public hearing. That process has been added since we published for this public hearing. So we had previously discovered that we could improve this process about how we all on staff and consultant side communicate about where public hearing notices go. So mistakenly, as John pointed out, the public hearing notice was published in the paper and it was mailed to the neighbors, but it wasn't mailed to the DNR. And that probably, in addition, was previously when we started talking about the text amendments and we started talking about the shoreline ordinance, I had myself reached out to the area hydrologist. So I think there was, miscommunication between Lisa and I on whose responsibility it is to get that public hearing notice out. So it was an error, but we are always trying to improve our software and our process to make checks to make sure that these things happen before processes move forward. And we have a new process that should prevent this from happening in the future.
Okay. Thanks. I think that Ian prefers an email notice, and I'm assuming OpenGov could just automatically care for that.
Yeah, I think there is
question?
one more step of, in OpenGov now with the public hearing, it allows Lisa and I to communicate about who's on that list because, we at, John's request previously, when we notified for the text amendments, we included riparian lots, that we can do more, and sometimes more is required, like the DNR in this case. So we have a process to be able to communicate the public hearing list if that needs to be amended due to the request.
Okay.
And then I don't know if Commissioner Gleeman, if we want to go over, what we just did, but with your questions, we talked about the standard is adjacent, but we're requesting a variance from the standard. When you review the variance, you go on your criteria for the variance, and the criteria, the variance is not doesn't specifically say adjacent, it says vicinity. But you got any other additional questions?
I have one question, if I could ask, because I'll just be perfectly honest. I don't think that we have the authority to just change the meaning of a standard in a particular case, just because that's what we want to do. So the reason I asked about when the deck was added was because it's my understanding this is essentially once the shoreland overlay district was created, so to speak, this property became, or this structure became non-conforming as it was built
Correct.
at the time.
Correct.
And you can't expand a non-conforming structure, at least not in our code. However, the question that I would really like an assessment of is, would replacing essentially or turning the existing portion that's a deck into a porch be considered an expansion based upon how we would define an expansion?
So I'm going to treat these two separately. The question of, is this an expansion of the principal structure? And then is it an expansion of a non-conforming use? It is an expansion of a principal structure. More square footage is going to be enclosed than it is today. It is currently a non-conforming use, but the requested variance would take away that non-conformity. So if the variance was approved, the new setback for the principal structure would be 57 feet, and the structure would no longer be non-conforming, and therefore you can expand a conforming principal structure.
Okay, but if it was in place at the time of the shoreline ordinance became effective,
Yep.
And it was essentially, according at least to the state, a deck is a portion of the home for setback purposes.
No, a deck is specifically cited as an exception. Other exceptions are stairways, boathouses, water-oriented structures. A deck is specifically cited in the code as an exception from the setback requirement.
I understand that, but that my take, at least as I read the state statute, which is what ours is based on, is that it's still considered a portion of the principal structure for other purposes, especially if it was there at the time the ordinance came into place. That's the point I'm making. The question in my mind,
aside from the setback standard, you are correct. The rest of the shoreland standards would apply to the deck as well.
because I just have to be honest and say, when we have a standard that's as specific as that setback averaging option, we can't interpret that to say something it doesn't say. And it talks about the two immediately adjoining properties. So what might apply to another property is irrelevant. It was a means of recognizing the fact that setbacks from the lakefront varied all over the place. And some would meet the new shoreland regulation, some would not. So this was a way to provide relief without a variance in certain circumstances. And that would be when the two adjoining properties didn't meet the setback either. It wasn't meant to be applied to a lot where the two adjoining properties did meet the setback. And we're just turning that on its head. If we say, well, we're just going to, allow somebody not to abide by the purpose of that standard. And that's where I'm struggling with this.
Could I ask for clarification here?
Mhm.
Is your struggle with, does the applicant have a right to request a variance
No.
from this standard?
No, is the way we're approaching this in line with the purpose of the setback averaging option?
And that's why we have the 5 criteria. And if we find any one of the 5 criteria deficient, then correct.
And what I'm saying is, from my perspective, it is deficient because that's not unique to this property. The fact that it has to have a 75-foot setback isn't unique. The fact that other properties don't is simply because they're between two non-conforming buildings. Done.
I'm just curious. Of course, we're talking a deck here. Could they replace their deck if they wanted to? Because the deck is 50 years old.
Yes, and actually they have.
Okay.
They've requested a deck permit. We've issued the permit because there is, the ordinance allows that.
Okay.
So
then the
not
screen.
only could they have.
Okay. Thank you. So the screen you can of course see through. The only thing that would be is the roof itself. I mean, it's not like you're adding a bedroom or something on there. It's extending the roof out how many feet, but everything else is going to be fully screened, correct?
Correct. The roof is tied in with the rest of the roof of the principal structure. There, our wall supports that support the screen.
Mm-hmm.
All of that makes that no longer a deck and part of the principal structure.
Okay, even though it's not sided completely, it's not considered a room. It's it's Minnesota, so it's screened, so it's limited. Okay, I just wanted to see where that goes because to me, it's you can see through it. It has a roof on it. That's what we're adding on to it over in the corner. We're not going out. We're going across. Is it how much farther out from the house is it? Then is it the 18 feet? Was it or is?
Well, let me go back because
show me the picture of
Yes.
this house again, please. I think that would help.
Yep. So we kind of have two factors in play with this variance. It's not only where the deck is, because if you looked at the rear of the house, the portion of the house facing the lake.
Yep.
The deck is 4 feet closer to, it's 4 feet beyond that.
Okay.
But because the shoreline becomes narrower as you head to the southwest, the deck being located to the southwest, it's both the deck is 4 feet further than the house, but the shoreland is also closer at that farthest point of what would become.
So if that shoreline went straighter, of course, then we wouldn't have had. Okay. Can you also bring up the rendering of the
before you go elsewhere there?
Okay.
I thought I heard, Eric, you say that if we grant the variance, then, that in essence changes what the setback is for the property. So would that allow an additional 4-foot addition on the house to be added without further variance? And as a matter of fact, you could follow the shoreline, to the north, and it could be even more, because if the building structure went diagonally, it could parallel the shoreline.
Excuse me, sorry about that.
Yeah.
So the way it's written, the recommendation is it would become 57. Excuse me again. Sorry, I'm going to drink some more.
Yeah.
I apologize for that. The way it's written, the new setback would be 57 feet from the ordinary high water level mark. And I explained why I typically give a foot or two more than what the minimum request would be, because during construction, something happens usually. But because the shoreline, so the setback would follow the shoreline. So it's not parallel with the front yard or the street. And so if you add it to the house, you could add do an addition to the house until you got to a point of 57 feet away. Now, if you have a concern about that, we can change the way we have that recommendation. We could have a recommendation that is the setback for the screen porch is 57 feet. and the setback for the house is the setback that exists today. Just for simplicity, I just picked the closest measurement and recommended that closest measurement, because if they were to add to the south and southwest, looking at that, they have a lot of room on that portion of the lot. That portion of that addition might have to be further back than where the screen porch would be, because the shoreland cuts at that angle. As you go to the southwest, this portion of the shoreline gets shorter. So if they did an addition here, it might not be able to come straight, perpendicular from the screen porch, because the setback, if we approve the 57 feet, is going to be at the same angle. It will be parallel with the shoreline. So if the concern is, what is the minimum, we can, you could rewrite that recommendation, be something like 57 feet for the screen porch and what exists today for the house.
Or for that matter, a screen porch could be built to the south and set back further so it doesn't require a variance.
That is a finding you could make. You could make a finding that if, what is the minimum variance request? Well, replace the deck and put it in a location where it would meet the current setback. But, we have 5 criteria. I gave you my analysis. Ultimately, it is, the 5 of you here tonight that provide a recommendation on those 5 criteria.
Yeah. Can you show the drawing of the house, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Is that staircase there now, or was that added on?
I think that was relocated, but that staircase is part of the deck. And
okay, yep. I was just curious to see if that's the spot where it was before they added on.
I think it was more centered, but
okay. Looks good. Okay, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I was just curious. I get better visual like this. I know the lines aren't there, but just to kind of look at, see what it looks like.
Yeah, to me, this the fact that it's maintaining the same footprint as the existing deck, and it is such a simple, it's not like they're erecting walls here. It's not creating a full, room. It really is just a porch with a roof on it. It seems like it's still staying within the scope of, what's currently there. Doesn't seem like they're asking for, more. To me, it seems like it does meet the criteria that Eric put out. And Eric, I thank you for the presentation. That was really helpful.
I want to make sure people, stay within, but they also keep maintaining and keeping their properties, good if they, they've been there since 1941, that type of thing too. So, I mean, it's not fully boxing anything out. It's still open, and it's the roof part of it that's different. So, thank you for showing me that. Thank you.
Okay. I can put this back up, but for conversation purposes, I'll stop.
That'd be great. Thank you.
A question concerning the letter that you showed, or the email that you showed from the DNR. How did it come about that we received that if they were not notified?
Well, I'm guessing it was John Small. It was on my list to follow up with him today, but he beat me to the punch and sent me the email. I mean, we were in communications with the shoreland ordinance, so, you know, he knew who to reach out to at the city when we were talking 6 weeks ago or whatever it was for the text amendments that are later on this agenda.
I don't think they normally tend to comment on individual setbacks. They do, I think they're primarily notified so that they can keep track of how many variances are being
But
approved.
as John correctly pointed out, they should still be notified even if by their silence, you
Right.
know, they don't object.
I agree. And again, I don't think there's anything necessarily unreasonable about adding a porch. My problem is I just don't see that the approach we're taking is in line with the purpose of the shoreland overlay district and the setback. Because what it does, it's like a cascading effect. So the request is for 57-foot setback. When you look at the 6 properties listed that were used in the example, that is the second closest encroachment. The only one closer is the 30 feet, which should never have been allowed. So this exceeds in encroachment any of the properties that are listed. And that has an effect for the next person who comes forward and wants to request a variance.
Yeah.
Now, if we take that same approach, what we're doing is just increasing encroachment toward the water. And the purpose of this setback standard is to limit encroachment, not to encourage it or to support it when it doesn't need to be. And I think that's my real concern. I don't think we're looking big picture at there's a reason for the standard. And the criteria is what we're doing in support of that standard or not. And I'm looking, the reason again that I asked about the whole non-conforming structure is that if that deck was there when that structure was built, and the shoreland ordinance came into effect with the new standard 75-foot setback, then I don't know how we define expansion. Because if simply putting a roof over an existing deck, so to speak, and enclosing it isn't an expansion, then it wouldn't need a variance.
Before the shoreline, this was put in place, what was the variance as far as where it could be?
The rear yard?
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, to be honest with you, and I don't know that it was particularly carefully monitored.
Yeah, it was pretty open.
The shoreland ordinance came into effect across the whole state. And it's hard to do because of as you said, the water line, it just meanders. Yeah. It's not a straight line.
It does, and it's hard too when you buy something and the rules change after you buy it too. I mean, it's been in the family forever, and all of a sudden now somebody can say, no, you got to go farther back. And that kind of drives me crazy with government. But
there's a purpose for it in this case. And that's really my concern, is the purpose. That's why we have ordinances. They're supposed to serve a purpose. And
Chair Barton, I agree with you, but I just want to emphasize that we just need to take it one step further, because they have the right to request a variance from ordinance standards. We need to make findings that the 5 criteria are not met. Now, that could be as general as the first one is, does this meet the intent of the district? And you may, in what you're saying, you could be arguing the intent of the shoreland district is to have the 75 feet. But when a motion is made, if it is for denial, I just would request you clarify which of the 5 or all 5
Yeah.
that you find deficient.
Well, I'm just giving my opinion on it because the standard is really what we have to, it's not what we'd like to do. It's what the code requires. And so I don't think it's in line with the shoreline. I don't think it's supportive of the shoreline ordinance purpose. And I also don't think we can just create a number, we just pick a number and say this is going to be the setback for this particular property. And that's essentially what we're doing based upon the fact that there's an existing deck.
Well, I appreciate you took that extra step to talk about this exact property, because if it's just a variance request, that is what you can do with the variance, is pick the new number. But when you're adding that it's, this particular property has a context, there is a purpose to the ordinance.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to help you,
Understand.
fully flesh out the findings.
Well, and I'm just trying to make the point that variances don't set a precedent as long as you're careful in when you approve them. So you really have to have some rigor about this. This is the practical difficulty. And the practical difficulty isn't I can't do what somebody else can do. That's not a practical difficulty.
Well,
property.
It is only for the one criteria. That is what criteria C is about. And other people in your vicinity do the same thing you're requesting. But there's 4 other criteria, and all 5 need to be found to be met.
And we also have to look at what standard are we deviating from? And like I say, we can't deviate to the degree that we've changed the meaning of the standard.
Then we also got a few doors down from his place, a guy built a big shed way closer to the water, but that blocks way more than his porch will do.
I understand, but again,
but what is the rules on different outbuilding and stuff like that too? I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that comes into play.
Related thing. But at any rate, that's all. That's my take on this. I'm not saying that's what we have to do. I'm just saying.
Sure.
I just personally couldn't support.
And I think that the rough component of it is significant in terms of the character of what we're looking at. Decks are decks, or they're excluded from being restricted to the setback for a reason. They are they're not the full facade, and having a full roof on it like that does definitely change the character of it.
Well, and they can't be roofed. That's one of the standards. You can't roof a deck. You can't enclose a deck. So that's just my take.
Yeah.
It's
a hard call.
It is. It is. I'd prefer to be able to take another route like that, non-conforming.
I guess just for yet more discussion about it, I don't know, I put myself in the owner's shoes, and I guess if this were mine, it's a deck, it's the same footprint, same square footage, it sounds like, it's the same impervious area. Maybe I'm thinking about it differently than you guys are, and I'm glad we're talking about it, but I guess I don't see that it's changing the character of the house, but I'm not an architect and I'm not a planner, so that's why I'm here to learn from you guys. But I don't know. I was leaning towards supporting it. I guess
some of the concern I have about the facade part of it is that from the lakeside, and this goes back to what shoreline regulations are about, in part, is what does it look like when you look at the lake, when you look at the shoreline from the lake or from the opposite shore? How much housing do you see? How much natural features do you see? And we are moving a house 13 feet closer to the lake, in essence. And, and if you think about that, that part of what that ordinance is about, it's about maintaining a somewhat natural looking shoreline so that everyone that is using the lake can enjoy that minimal impact.
But things change. You sold off a lot and there's a new house in that spot. So that affected what the shoreline looked like.
It does, but it meets the criteria for the shoreline regulations.
Yep, I understand that part of it, but it changed the shoreline.
Sure.
Yes.
Always gonna change
That's inevitable. It is going to happen. But
I know we got an acre and a half
there.
down the road. I would love to know who owns it right down by the park there, because it's a beautiful spot where the stream is. It's been there empty for years, but it's a beautiful spot that's still open, but that's not much left.
I think
Mhm.
the biggest thing particularly on a variance is the whole practical difficulty piece, which really does get to there's something unique about the property that doesn't apply to other properties that prevents them from doing what they want to do. That's one of the key aspects. And in this case, the setback requirement applies to every property. Some properties can use the averaging. This isn't one of them. So the 75-foot setback is applicable to every other property unless they happen to be one sandwiched between two properties already developed with non-conforming structure. And that's the issue. I don't know, I can't find anything unique here that would warrant just allowing a variance.
Chair Barton, if you would allow me, I'd like to just, I don't want to add anything more to the criteria, but if we could just maybe review the criteria and what they are, would that be appropriate?
Sure, fine.
So A is it in harmony or consistent with the general purposes and intent of the comprehensive plan? And the second is, does it adversely affect health, safety, or general welfare? The third one is the variance necessary to special conditions that apply to the structure and land in question that are particular to this property and do not generally apply to other lands and structures of the district or the vicinity. So this one is, how is this property special compared to the other ones? Is this minimum? Is the variance request minimum? And then this fifth one has 5 parts to it. Is the property owner proposing a use of the property that is reasonable but not permitted? Does the plight of the property owner due to circumstances that are unique to the property? The variance, if granted, will alter the essential character of the locality. Economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties, and the variance is consistent with the city plans and overlays. So I assume, because we're going to have, Lisa and I are going to have to put together the findings should a motion be made based on this discussion. You are referring to E2 here?
I'm referring to 2 and 5.
Okay.
Because again, one of the adopted plans is the shoreland ordinance overlay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, unless I misunderstood him, we would have been referring to 3.
We talked quite a bit about 3 in when, before we opened the public hearing. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that was his question about
Right.
this being 13 or 18 feet closer. Actually, on that particular piece of the shoreline, it would be the closest property, house or structure to the shoreline. Next to 2 properties that would be set back where the structures are set back significantly further.
Which has a tendency to have an impact on the neighbors
Yeah.
in terms of their view shed.
Yeah. Again, that's my take on it. People are free to disagree. I'm just trying to follow the standards, the various standards and the shoreline overlay district standards. The only other question I had, and it popped into my head if I can before I forget it, and Eric, maybe you know, is this property also in the general floodplain overlay district?
I believe it is.
Are there any applicable standards in that one? I don't think we've.
I don't believe so because in general the floodplain is trying to regulate both. Don't put fill that would raise the flood on adjacent properties. Don't put a structure in place that would impede the flow of water should a flood occur. Neither of those happen in this case. The deck's already there. The deck already is on footings. They've replaced the deck with footings. The flood elevation isn't going to change by putting a porch on that deck. I'm not even sure because this is fairly high compared to the neighbors. I don't know offhand what the exact flood elevation was, but even if it got up to those footings are already there. So it's not increasing any obstruction.
Increasing impermeable surface.
That's not a floodplain issue. That's because that's not a floodplain issue. That's a R1 and a shoreland issue, but not a floodplain
I
issue.
took a quick glance at it, and it looked to me like there was some kind of documentation that had to be part of the request, that the zoning administrator had to provide some kind of documentation when a property is in the general floodplain.
Oh yeah, when the original floodplain is mapped, that's correct, but that's already been done.
No, I meant when there are requests. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't really carefully read it. I just happened to notice it followed.
I think that's referring to when you change what properties are within the floodplain, and we do actually have a request for that. But
Okay.
this property is in a floodplain. That notification has already occurred.
Okay.
Can you bring up the addresses one again, please? The picture with all the addresses. I'm sorry, the drawing of the shoreline with the
Map.
addresses, the map, sorry, that's my bad.
Mhm. Yeah, no problem. This one?
Yes, I was just looking at that 2592. How far away is that one from the shoreline?
That's about 60.
Okay, and that was built in 2004. I was just curious. That's
But-
that's the newer houses we had back then. I know it probably
But the
wasn't
one
in their
to the
floodplain back then.
northwest is 60, and the one to the south, northeast is 60. The one to the southeast, because of the way that actually curves, is
That's
30.
that's a big old. Okay, I was just curious to see time wise when these, because that's the newest one we have on the. Unless you go way down. Okay, thank you.
Chair Barton, do you want to ask for a motion?
Yeah, I can, if everybody has their question answered, I can see if anybody wants to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay. What's the motion?
The motion to accept the variance, or make it, I should say, the setback.
Recommend approval?
Yes, please.
Is there a second? And that's based upon
Pardon me? I didn't hear you. You broke up. I'm sorry.
oh, that's okay. That's based upon the staff report.
Okay.
The findings in the staff report.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Eric, that was you? Okay. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor will say aye when Lisa calls. Those opposed will say nay. Lisa, do your thing. You're on mute.
Chair Barton,
Nay.
Commissioner Brenna,
Aye.
Commissioner Geldman,
Nay.
Vice Chair Mungy,
Aye.
Commissioner Weiss. Sorry.
Okay, then.
Sorry, just to clarify, that was nay, Mr. Commissioner Wise?
No, I said aye.
You said aye. Okay, well, thank you for the let me clarify that. Lisa, did you get three ayes, 2 nays?
Correct.
What I got. Okay, thank you. This will go to the council on what day?
It will go on the first Tuesday in June. I just don't remember that date.
Just so Paul knows.
June 1st.
June 1st. Thanks for coming, Paul. All right. On to our next public hearing, which is for an interim use home occupation permit for Bradley Plumbing. So first thing we'll do is the staff report.
Chair Barton, this will actually be the first staff report that Ms. Ritchie does.
Oh,
There you go. Congratulations.
all right, Lisa, you're up.
Okay, I am going to share my screen and bear with me on this. Let me know when you can see it.
I can see it. It's little.
Okay, I am going to try something else.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
Okay. So we have at the address of 2081 Park Row, an interim use permit, AKA IUP, for 2-level home occupation. The IUP for a 2-level home occupation allows for business or enterprise conducted in a dwelling or accessory dwelling and incidental to the principal resident use, whether conducted for profit or nonprofit. The city regulates home occupations to ensure the character of our residentials are maintained. Mr. Bradley is a plumbing contractor who states his business is mainly based in and out of his plumbing truck, and his proposal is to continue parking his truck in his driveway. And figure 1 here is the GIS aerial view of his home with the truck parked in his driveway. This is the general staff review with consistency with the city plans. Should I read this, Eric? You'll have to direct me here. I'm not.
You don't have to read the whole thing. You could just point out number 6 there that talks about heating, plumbing, and air conditioning.
Okay. So the level 2 home occupations are those which have potential neighborhood impacts. Level 2 home occupation requires approval of the city council. An interim use permit shall be obtained by any person operating a level 2 home occupation. Level 2 home occupations may include but are not strictly limited to heating, plumbing, or air conditioning services. The applicant operates a plumbing service business and has requested an IUP to park his plumbing truck within his driveway. Continuing on, the general provisions.
Sorry, Lisa, I'm going to jump in. You could just summarize that all these are conditions that Mr. Bradley will need to meet, and that's a fine summary.
Okay. Would you like me to read them then, or no, just summarizing? Okay. And the applicant performs his work at the location of the customer's residence or business, and business operations conducted at the applicant's home is limited to bookkeeping, invoicing, and scheduling, which are all activities incidental and secondary to residential use. The parking of the truck use is for business, will be located within the applicant's driveway. This is a continuation of the permit review. I'll give you a moment just to read that.
Lisa, I know we're in the middle, but could you go back to the prior page?
Sure.
And I just wanted to, on item,
That's the next page.
no, this one's good. On item 4, little bullet 4, the use or appearance of the use is compatible. And it says the plumbing business is compatible. Isn't that primarily, I mean, isn't the reason it's compatible is because there really aren't any exterior changes to the dwelling unit?
Correct.
I mean, really none of no work is performed outside
Correct.
Anything. Okay. I mean, sometimes it just, future reference, it pays to explain why it's compatible.
Okay.
Just FYI.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. I have to be honest, I wasn't prepared for this, so I'm learning as we go.
That's okay. It's all right.
One thing that I wanted to note on here was the plumbing business will not impose by agreement any additional cost to the public. I think that was important to point out. And the parking regulations are as stated here. I don't know if the truck is under 6 tons. And to be quite honest, that was a little bit confusing as to the stating here of vehicles parked in a driveway or other area are not allowed to extend or encroach in the alleyway of the right of way of the sidewalk. And to actually going up a paragraph here, the trucks, trailers, or buses less than 6 tons shall not be stored in the front yard. Now,
it looks like it's a 1-ton van. I mean, that's a normal contractor van, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
but isn't this stating that it should not be less than 6 tons? Which, should that read, should be more than 6 tons?
Well,
everything is less than 6 tons. I mean, all the vehicles would be.
I think this might be one of those cases where, we're in the midst of changing this whole thing, the off-street parking, particularly for the commercial piece of it. So maybe we can just find out from the applicant, what vehicle he has. It's clearly a commercially used vehicle. So I don't see this as being a problem.
Okay.
And if I could just add, I guess I'm making an assumption. Should, with your next item, you provide a recommendation to carry the text amendments forward, that would be on the same meeting as this, and we can make sure that the order of the approvals happen appropriately, because we are proposing to make an amendment there. But it is, all ordinance provisions will need to be met by this.
Yeah.
Okay. And I wanted to give you a visual of the truck that he's proposing that he continues to park. And I want to add that he's indicated that he's parked his truck here for the past 37 years and he would like to continue to do so. So based on the findings described in this report, the staff recommends these following actions. Approval of the requested zoning interim use home occupation permit. And again, as I noted, Mr. Bradley stated that he's a plumbing contractor. His business is mainly based in and out of his plumbing truck, and the proposal is to continue to park his truck in his driveway. And I didn't find any conditions upon the approval, other than he continues to follow the ordinances set forth by the city, which apparently have been an issue in the past with the code compliance. So they just want to make sure that he becomes very rigid with complying. Okay.
Okay, is that it?
That's it. Yes.
Okay, does anyone have questions on the staff report? If you take the screen sharing down, then I can see
Sure.
everyone. Make sure they're still in attendance.
Okay.
Oh, they're still here.
Yeah.
Anyone have any questions on the staff report? Now, based Eric, on what you said, I would expect, at least from our perspective, that if we make a recommendation for approval, it would include the condition that the parking standards would be met.
I think that, I mean, that's required anyways, but just to clarify, you know, this is an interim use permit that would allow him to park this business vehicle on his property. He needs to comply with every other section of the ordinance, including the parking ordinance.
Right. It's just one thing we don't know yet because we haven't done the text amendment. Okay, then if no commissioner has any questions on the staff report, I'll open the public hearing at, well, first I'll give, is Mr. Bradley here?
No, he is not.
Okay, then I will open the public hearing portion at 8:08. And if anybody has any input they'd like to give, now would be the time to raise your hand.
John, is your hand still raised from previous, or do you have something to say? I know better. John, what would you like to say?
At a great disadvantage in trying to assess this, because on page 1, and I'm an equal opportunity complainer, Lisa, sorry. There is on the first page under the paragraph background, it says, insert a screening shot of the parcel from Ramsey County GIS. Figure 1 location map. So
Let me
I as an attempt to comment with the information provided to every citizen of this city, no more, no less, was at a great disadvantage. And I assume that all members of the astute council are also at the same disadvantage to be able to use visual, and there wasn't even an address that I would have gone out in my own vehicle and taken a look, because I want to be making comments that are from a spot of saying, I know, but I don't know. And tonight, the quick through the GIS pictures, I don't even feel that I'm capable of continuing on this. So I'm backing out. I don't have enough information to be making intelligent comments. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Yeah, I do think, if we're going to provide something visual at the meeting, whenever possible, it should be included in the packet. Okay, then I'll close the public hearing since there's nobody else in attendance. Close it at 8:10 and back to the commission for discussion.
Just had a question, two questions actually. One, so he's been doing this for 37 years. What brought about the need for this? I mean, obviously, it sounds like it's something he should have had at some point, right? Was it brought forth by somebody as a complaint, or how did it get to us? And then second, the IUP is, and pardon me, I don't remember this from our code. Is there a time limit to that, or is it? Or actually, sorry, did it say 2 years? I forget now. Those are my two questions.
Eric,
Lisa?
can I ask for your help?
No problem. I can, my understanding is yes, it was a complaint. And as part of the investigation of the complaint, it was identified that they did not have home occupation. I think the applicant just decided that it was easiest to apply for the IUP instead of trying to investigate, is there a legal nonconformity here, that the business occurred before the regulation came, and does it apply to the truck in question that he owned at that time, or new truck? It just was simplest for the applicant to request the IUP to clarify. The time period, there should be a time period in IUP. Typically, often it's 5 years. You could say that it's in effect as long as Mr. Bradley owns the house and is the sole proprietor of his business. So, you could have the time period that it expires if he moves, or if he sells his business or closes his business. But, which making it 5 years would be difficult to implement, of him remembering, us remembering that 5 years has expired and we need to get a new one. But the intent is that if he sells his business, that truck shouldn't be there anymore. If he sells his house, if he moves somewhere else in North St. Paul, he'll have to request a new IUP for where he moves to. So it could be as simple as, whether that's a 1-part or 2-part condition, but the time limit is until such time as he no longer owns this property, or until such time he no longer owns the business.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that makes sense.
I can add, I wasn't sure about the timing on the IUP, but I can add that I did talk to Jason Mallinger, our fire chief and code inspector, and it did come forth from a number of other issues with code enforcement. And this was just one of many, and they just want him to comply with everything that has not been happening. So they've requested him to apply for this.
And then I guess maybe, if I could, I'd like to kind of restate a previous statement I made in that he's going to need to apply, all sections of the ordinance apply to him and his truck. And I'm just going to clarify, basically by the opposite. There is no variance request. We're not granting any variance requests through this IUP. In no way in granting this IUP does it give him rights to park his vehicle where another vehicle of the same size and dimensions is allowed to park.
Thank you.
I mean, the whole purpose of the IUP, including this type of business, is that it does have the potential to create impacts, and parking something where you shouldn't be parking it is one of those potential impacts. Okay, any other discussion? Other than, would everyone be satisfied if it's recommended to approve this, that the time limit would really be based upon what planner Eric said regarding with, the IUP is no longer in effect once the business is sold or the applicant moves, or is no longer operating the business at the residence?
And I'm sorry, can I ask one other question? I'm sorry, excuse me. There's other code enforcement issues that you said. I'm just kind of going back to, is this a good neighbor guy that's having it, or, what's the issue? There's other code enforcements. And did the inspector tell him to get this license? Is that what you said?
And I'm not sure if I should be, I don't know if I misquoted that. What I do know is that they have been working with this resident over a number of years on other issues, and this was just one of the things. And so I don't know if it was actually recommended that he do this. I just know that there's a history of code enforcement issues at that residence.
I don't know if that weighs into something when we're on the planning commission or not.
I think, again, we have to look at this just in the perspective of what the requirements are.
Okay.
And the fact that they need to be met. There's nothing in here that would...
That he can hide from is what you're saying, right? So there's really nothing that that's going to grant him anything as far as special dispensation. It's just, okay, that makes sense.
That's actually what my concern was. I know we need to keep it relevant to what the issue here is at hand. And I think those other issues are something else for another conversation.
And we'll work our way off of what we got. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing somebody would potentially get with the home occupation is they can put a sign, a small sign that identifies their business. And that's about it. So
I would ask that we, Lisa, would you bring up both the map and the pictures that you had?
Good idea. Yeah, nice to see him again.
And we'll go. This is the GIS map that I do apologize. I did not get that in as John Schmall had stated. But this is an overall aerial. You can let me know when you'd like to.
What I may add while Lisa goes to the other pictures, likely where this vehicle is parked in this aerial photo and some of the pictures later is in violation of the code. He can park it in his driveway, but he still has to park it in his driveway in compliance with the code, which would be, if we adopt the standard, the setback from the right of way or the right of way line. But so it may be that this picture is showing an improper location. Through the IUP, we're not approving the location as shown. He needs to park it in the driveway in compliance with the code.
Thanks
Lisa,
for
can you
that
go to the pictures at the end?
Okay.
So there is room on his driveway to meet the code. It is likely not the location he's choosing in these photos to park his vehicle.
So he has a trailer too.
At least in one of the, well, that might be.
Both of them, yeah. One's behind the truck on the other side.
Well, and I think the little landscaping there is what creates some of the issue on that one side of the driveway. But I think Eric's point is well taken. It doesn't really matter. The fact that somebody might have been parking in violation for many, many years does not give them the right to be in violation of any particular ordinance. So maybe that's one of the issues.
Is it specifically because the truck is too close to the curb and gutter? Is that what you mean, Eric?
Correct. The property line is not the curb line. The property line is in most cases is somewhere in the distance of 15 feet from the curb line.
Yeah, that GIS picture showed pretty close to where the setback line is, property line. There.
You'd have to bring it all the way back to the garage, it looks like.
Yeah, like the car.
Okay. Thank you.
But that's why I just wanted to emphasize this is not a variance request. In no way by approving an IUP are you saying that it's okay for him to violate any other section of the code.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else from anyone? So Eric, are you looking for a recommendation that includes the time limit language?
Correct.
Incorporate?
Correct. Yep. And Lisa and I will work between now and the city council to not only, prepare the resolution with that condition, should you recommend that, and also correct any deficiencies in the staff report for the city council staff report.
Okay. So are commissioners comfortable with a timeline that essentially is the IUP is in effect until the time he no longer owns and operates the business from the residence? From this residence, anyway.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I think that makes sense.
Okay. So then I guess I'm looking for a recommendation to that effect, which would be to recommend approval of the interim permit subject to that timing limit.
So we make a motion?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion for approval. Yes.
Who wants to second that?
I will second.
Okay, second by Rick. Any other discussion? Not then, all those in favor will say aye, opposed no when Lisa calls your name.
Chair Barton,
Aye.
Commissioner Brenna,
Aye.
Commissioner Geldman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Monge,
Aye.
and Commissioner Wise.
Aye.
Okay, then that'll be recommended to the council, and I guess that'll be on the 1st of June as well? In case, well, you'll let it know, I'm sure.
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
On to commission business action items. The thing we love the most. Code text amendment.
Chair Barton, do you have any introduction you want to give, or do you just want me to jump in?
Well, for those who weren't at our last meeting, we did hold the public hearing. We got some input. We had some discussion, and then some concerns about certain pieces of it, because some of this started so long ago we couldn't even remember some of the reasons for certain things. So we tabled the discussion and we're picking it up again now. And I guess maybe what I think we might do, Eric, is have you go through just the memorandum you have based upon the input we got and what we discussed at the last meeting. And then I know that John had said he had input, and maybe we should get that before we delve into the rest of it.
That works for me. That's exactly how I have the presentation set up, with the exception of I have two kind of introduction slides. But we'll just go over the changes. So before I jump into the introduction, the draft ordinance that is attached to this staff report is different than the draft ordinance that we reviewed in April, because of the changes I'm going to review. So the ordinance attached includes these changes. But so they're, the draft ordinance isn't written the same way as this presentation. But the reason why we're doing this, city adopted its comprehensive plan, and you need to review your controls, including your zoning ordinance, and make amendments as necessary to implement the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. In April, we reviewed 6 sections of the code and numerous changes. I believe there's 23 sections within the ordinance of changes, and in many of those sections, there's multiple changes. And again, for this presentation, I'm highlighting what has happened, or what I changed due to the conversation from the feedback we received at the Planning Commission at the public hearing, and any comments from any planning commissioners. So the first one has to do with the truck parking restricted section of the ordinance. There was an error of this erroneous comma vans. So, the sentence would read without that section now. So it does not apply to vehicles that are actively being loaded or unloaded. We had definitions of different types of commercial vehicles, but we didn't have a definition overall of what is a commercial vehicle compared to something else. So we included this language, a new definition. We had discussed this at previous meetings that were not public hearings. It was just something that was omitted by mistake. We had a discussion about the ADU, that we have a minimum size of an attached ADU, but we only had a maximum size for a detached. So the language is revised to be very similar to the attached ADUs. A detached ADU cannot be more than 300 square feet and shall not be larger than 900 square feet, even though looking at this. Oh yeah, no, that should work the way that's redlined. And then we had a number of changes to the parking. One of those included, we had changed the general standards to be general standards for commercial, industrial, institutional, attached residential. I think the intention there was a lot of standards about parking lot design, and typically in a detached residential area, you don't have parking lots, you have driveways. But it was pointed out through the public hearing comment that in doing that, we didn't have a size for a parking area for detached. So I created this A and B structure, and the B structure for general standards of detached residential units only has the size of a parking stall. There were a couple of other changes in the table. We had pretty much in every section a label that said that you need to be parked at least 10 feet back from the curb or roadway. what I've done is I moved it to another location in the code that talks about other restrictions. So it's not that that requirement is gone. It got moved to where it was previously located that includes other standards. So we'll go over that in a second. So it's not that, you know, now people don't have to observe that. The second change was we have two types of recreational vehicle or recreational vehicles, recreational vehicle and recreational vehicle large. We had the same identical standard for both of them. The size of a recreational vehicle, not a large recreational vehicle, a standard recreational vehicle with the requirement of can't be parked closer than 10 feet from the curb or right of way. Conforming lots would allow you to park a recreational vehicle size vehicle in compliance, in the parking lot in compliance with its location standards. So the change is that now a recreational vehicle does not have a time limit in the driveway, but it needs to meet all of the other parking standards of any vehicle. So location, on a surface, all that kind of thing. So all it does is change that if a lot has the space for a recreational vehicle and has all the improvements and other code standards, if it's in compliance with all other sections of code, it could be there indefinitely. Large recreational vehicles, which on a standard lot would not be able to meet all the other standards, is still limited to no longer than 24 hours. So the previous table where previously we had it can't be any closer than 10 feet from the curb or right away, got relocated to where previously, and we, you know, this was identified in the interim use permit, that currently the standard is that a vehicle cannot be parked in a driveway or other area not allowed to extend or encroach into an alley or street right of way or a public sidewalk. So you could see with the final sentence, you still can't park or encroach into an alley or public sidewalk. But essentially what has changed is, and again, with the previous picture we showed, you know, it's difficult for every homeowner to know where their property line is. Now, instead of trying to figure out, for the case of Bradley Plumbing, where the property line is, here we can just measure back from the curb, and as long as the Bradley Plumbing vehicle is parked 10 feet from the curb, it's in compliance with the code. And then there was a couple of notes about community gardens and yard sales that, particularly the mixed use allows residential. These are things that residents would expect. So adding community gardens as an interim use in the mixed use district, and adding yard sales as a permitted use in the mixed use districts. So that's the changes. Staff recommendation is approval of the ordinance. But again, I just want to clarify, the ordinance you're seeing today includes all the changes that I just highlighted. It has been changed from the one reviewed in April based on what those slides indicated.
Okay. That it?
That's it. Those are the changes.
Okay. As you were talking, I'm just going to ask this because it came to mind when you were talking about the general standards for detached residential uses for the parking thing, and you mentioned that, we added just it didn't have any standards essentially. Mm-hmm. So we added the space size. It's still I just didn't want to bother trying to find it. But it does have the construction standards. In other words, it has to be a paved surface, blah, blah, blah.
Correct.
That's another piece that's in code, and I just want to make sure that that's also a part of this. Maybe I'll try to find it where that would be. Okay. Alrighty. So before we start discussing it, why don't we get any input that John wanted to provide? So if you could unmute John, and John, try to be as succinct as possible.
Now you want to be succinct. Anyway, I had said, and I don't have an answer. I wish I did, but the page 31 of 75, if I can keep my cursor in the right spot, lot line front, there's absolutely no mention of how that's determined or even guessed at. And many things depend on that, knowing that. Garbage containers, number one, garbage carts, not having them in the front yard. So a citizen starting to do some measurements has no way of knowing where that front lot line is. Maybe that's true. Maybe you have to have a survey in order to determine where that front lot line is. But I just find it frustrating that there's no mention of where it might be. I don't have an answer. And I don't know if the assembled individuals on this Zoom call have any idea either how that might be determined. There's now the 10-foot that has to do with parking, and that might be a good guess, but it's not really what the front lot line is. So I'll just move on from that point because, as I said, I don't have an answer. I highlighted the other one. Yeah, there it is on page 33 of 75. Vehicle, first of all, there's vehicle commercial. Under that, it's stated vehicle commercial type 1 gives a definition. And right under that is, again, vehicle commercial type 1. So I assume that was supposed to be vehicle commercial type 2. Anyone in agreement with that?
Yes.
And at this point, I'm very much behind in my rotator cuff exercises, and I'm leaving. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay. How would you like to proceed?
Well, if I may, I think Chair Barton, from how you responded, I concur. I think John's correct on the vehicle commercial, the 2 references to vehicle commercial 1. The second one should have been vehicle commercial 2. So I'll make that change.
That was on my little.
And I'm going to just share my screen here, but I understand his comment that it would take work for a resident to determine where the front line is, but I disagree that the language in the code doesn't say where it is. It may be that it takes somebody some time to find it, but the code is clear where the front lot line is. And it's the boundary of the lot which abuts the existing or dedicated public or private street. That's where it is. I understand that there isn't always property pins everywhere. The width of streets is not always the same. Even sometimes the width of right-of-way is not always the same. But every plat is available on Ramsey County's website. So if your house is platted, you can pull up that plat. You can see what the right-of-way width is. You know, the street is a street. There is information that's available to locate this. I agree with Mr. Schmall that it takes effort, but the code is clear. The code describes where the front lot line is. So I when I had a conversation with him, I understand his frustration that it may take some work to figure out where it is, but there's nothing wrong with the code. The code describes it. So I guess, you direct me what to do, but I don't feel a need to correct the language because the language is correct.
I don't know how we could define something that would make it obvious to every property owner exactly where their specific lot line would be located. Other than it's the front, the front one is abuts the street.
Correct.
That's all we can say.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't know the setback on every street. And that is not something we would put in code anyway.
Correct. Because it varies.
Code is written to apply universally in most cases, not to this property and then to that property over there. So that is a tough one. But GIS is helpful.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I need you to direct me to modify that definition because I don't have any suggestions. Because again, I think the text is accurate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with the definition. The front lot line is what it is. I mean, we could say the same for the side lot line and for the rear lot line.
Correct.
They're all subject to setbacks. So I understand the front is more interesting and has more regulations, I suppose, but unless somebody else has a better way to define it. Oh, okay. Anybody have questions on any of the changes that were made? I had a question about something we haven't talked about, and it has to do with the parking thing. And that is there is a general regulation, 154.010A 13. That
would you happen to know what page of the packet that's on?
It's not in the packet because it's not changing. That's
okay. Okay. Well, that
doing it.
helps.
And that is one that says boats and recreational vehicles parked in the front yard may not exceed 21 feet. And one of the reasons for putting all the parking stuff in one place is to avoid these kind of inconsistent regulations. So I think we need to take a look at 010A13 and get rid of that.
And you said this was.
What was this is the zoning code, not the parking code, right?
The zoning code.
Yep.
I could probably find it. Maybe somebody who plays with their computer could find it real quick. I just don't have it in front of me. All I know is that that's what it says.
We can do a search for boats or 21 feet. I'm sure we can find it. I just wanted to clarify it wasn't in the parking section outside the zone.
No, it's not. It's in zoning code. That has created confusion with trailers and that kind of thing. And since we're now regulating all of that in parking, we shouldn't have any standard in any other section of zoning code that would conflict.
So Chair Barton, just to complete that, I assume I'll be checking to make sure that when I remove that section, that the recreational vehicles large, all cover that issue, and therefore it's redundant and we
Yeah.
don't correct.
I think the only difference is it's 20, that limited, it addressed both trailers and boats, but it said boats and trailers. I always thought because boats are usually parked on a trailer, they're not parked on the ground. And that was limited to 21 feet. So we may have changed that limit, I believe, in the proposed text amendment.
Mm-hmm.
But that's fine. All the more reason not to have a different limit somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, did everybody carefully read through all of this and make all kinds of notes? I believe everybody fell asleep. Everybody's muted. That's pretty funny. So I take that as a yes, you did, and you have no further input.
I would say I'm satisfied with the way it is now.
Yeah.
How's that for a fair statement?
I like that. I still had a couple unanswered things that we didn't get into, and that had to do with the fact that we allow assisted living and memory care in the MU1, but we don't allow senior housing with services, which includes assisted living and memory care. So I just wanted to clarify. I think I know why, but I just want to clarify that is what we want. Keeping in mind,
I'm sorry, apologize. I'm going to that page.
okay,
And I will definitely apologize that, much of this discussion occurred before, with the previous planning commission and previous staff. So I just need to take a look at this. Because it might be one of two issues. If we're using old terminology and it didn't get removed, we should remove it. But my guess, and I'm going to share the screen just because of the way it's written. Sorry, where's my share screen? My guess is senior housing with services is not updated correctly. As I understand it, it's almost impossible to get a new nursing home in the state of Minnesota, almost nationally, I think. So now the new terminology is skilled nursing facility. And that is different. Skilled nursing facility is different than assisted living or memory care. And so I'm curious if, particularly for that senior housing with services is conditional instead of being permitted, that I guess my suggestion would be that senior housing with services should be changed to skilled nursing facility. And I could check the definition to match. But your question of maybe, well, I guess I'll ask, does that address your question?
well, I guess what I was thinking, and gosh, maybe, I don't know if Rick can help with this or not. He's been on the commission longer, but it seems to me that at one point we added senior housing with services as a use somewhere in association with another, multifamily dwelling. And that's what was getting confusing to me, because generally speaking, even assisted living and memory care, they just go together.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't certain really what differentiated senior housing with services, and maybe it's a definitional issue. It could be.
Well, I can address the senior housing part.
Okay.
There is a state definition, and that we use a slightly different term, but there is a state definition of housing for the elderly. And I do understand that's technically how it's written in the state statute. And that's not always the best phrasing. So a lot of people do call it senior housing. It doesn't usually have a difference as much on the zoning side, but there are some preemptions of local governments can't restrict certain types of housing if you also allow multifamily. So senior housing, which replaces the housing for the elderly, that's a state statute thing, and we need to address it.
Oh, okay.
Senior housing with services is, well, I should say, because the state definition of housing for the elderly, it doesn't require any services at all. It's not assisted living. It's not memory care. It's more of a preemption that you can't, if you allow apartments, you have to allow apartments for the elderly. Senior housing with services, I would believe, would be the skilled nursing, since I don't see skilled nursing as a use here. And if there are no nursing homes in town, there's no need to have nursing homes as a use, because the regulatory agencies are not going to approve any new ones. Okay. So I think I could check the definition of senior housing with services, but if simply your comment is senior housing is allowed in the MU1 and senior housing with services is, well, they're conditional uses, but assisted living and memory care is not allowed as a conditional use in MU1. Just give me some direction to add it as a conditional use in the MU1, and I will.
Well, I don't necessarily want to do that because I'm not certain exactly what it is. All I know is assisted living and memory care is allowed in MU1. Senior housing with services isn't. Whether, I don't know if it would make sense to allow it. I really don't, because I'm not entirely certain what it is.
Maybe I'm reading, the table's on the screen, right?
Yes, it is, but it's hard.
Yeah, they could definitely be formatted better, but particularly here that like the headings are in the middle, but assisted living is in R3.
That's right. Right.
MU3, but it's not in MU1.
Right. At one point,
senior housing and senior housing with services is in the 3 at R3, MU1, MU3. So if your comment is assisted living should be in the same as senior housing with services, well, then we can add a conditional in MU1 and it's the same.
So is Polar Ridge in MU1?
I can't help you. I hope somebody else in the planning commission maybe can.
Can we bring up the map for MU1, or do we have the map of this anywhere?
I can find it for you, but I don't have it in the.
Well, I can't. I would think it would be. I mean, jeepers, it's a stone throw from downtown.
Right, I know, and that is assisted living and memory care.
Mm-hmm. Is it memory care too?
I believe so. It's at least assisted living.
Yeah, I know assisted living. Yeah, I wasn't sure about memory.
So it's got. We don't want that to be a non-conforming use if it's in MU1.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I suppose I could pull out my big map.
I'm pulling it up right now.
Oh, good, thank you.
Thought the chairman would have on the wall right behind her the map.
Yeah. So we have the downtown here.
There we go. Yep. So it's Helen.
Yep, Helen.
What's that road?
So Gateway, what is it?
Let's see. Got too many things up on my computer here. I gotta
Trying to
move
get closer to my head. It looks
Toolbar.
like it.
Here I go. So
It's in the,
this is Helen here.
It's right on that corner down there. Yep. So it's up against the trail. I mean, you go down the hill to the trail.
Right.
Right around.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's, well, if it's up here,
It's at the left
That-
one, the left right there. Yep. It's on the left side of Helen to the
so
end.
that is MU3,
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
where this would be MU1.
Okay, then we're good.
Then we don't have to make any changes.
All right, no changes.
Don't do anything. So, does anybody think there's anything we've missed in this thing?
No?
I mean, we don't. There are going probably to be little pitches.
Well, if I may, Chair Barton. So I would say this is what we're proposing for the 6 sections that I mentioned at the beginning. We've made a commitment to continue to work on sign ordinance, short-term rentals. You know, there's a number of other code sections that we're going to work on. Should we find at a later date a minor issue that needs to be addressed in one of these sections we're doing tonight, we could always add that
Right.
at that time.
Right.
So this is the big batch related to the comp plan amendment. There are other sections of the code we know we need to update. So, I just want to mention that don't be scared that like this is our one shot for 10 years and we can't make any changes again.
No, I was just kind of letting the newer commissioners know that try as we might, we may not have caught every potential wrinkle in coming up with these changes, and that's just not humanly possible to do. So if you find things going forward, generally when you find them is when some kind of application comes forward and you realize, oh, well, this isn't really very clear, or we're missing something.
With you as our chair, we have a much better chance of getting closer. So let me tell you that.
I don't know about that. But one reason you discuss these things is because of that reason. The more you can make clear why you're doing something, the better off you are if it is continued later on, to subsequent viewers, so to speak, or readers. So, all right, then I guess our action tonight would be to recommend that the council approve the proposed text amendments to implement the 2040 comprehensive plan.
Chair Barton, can I just clarify
Yes.
that motion would include clarifying the vehicle commercial 2
Yes.
and finding the reference to boats and trailers and adding that to
Yes.
the list of amendments.
And either deleting it or whatever.
But that was the 2 I heard in discussion that need to be added to that motion.
Yes. Thank you. Anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
That was Rick who moved. Is there a
Yes.
second? Second by John. Oh, you guys, all your males. It's really hard for me sometimes to differentiate voices. It's
Put my fingers up too. So
At all. All righty, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, when Lisa calls your name, signify your vote by saying aye or nay.
Chair Barton,
Aye.
Commissioner Brenna,
Aye.
Commissioner Geldman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Monkey,
aye.
and Commissioner Wise.
All righty. That's approved. I guess that'll go on June 1st too. Council will be busy.
Yes, they will.
Not that they're not always busy.
That's right.
Okay, we have business. Do we have any reports from staff? Other than what's already been reported?
I will, looks like I might have failed to add one thing, but basically to talk about the meetings. So we do have a special meeting scheduled on, what does that make it?
19th?
The 20th of May.
What day was it?
Just double checking here. We need to post, yes, we need to post for the public hearings by noon tomorrow. And actually, we have a couple of minor issues we need to resolve on both of them. So we will know by tomorrow whether that meeting gets canceled, but there is a possibility
Okay.
that we'd cancel that meeting. But reminder, until we tell you otherwise, there's a special meeting on the 20th, and then the regular meeting would be on June 3rd. I'm confident that we will have the meeting on June 3rd, because if the items that would have been on the 20th get delayed, they'll be on the June 3rd meeting.
Okay.
Just a logistics issue. It wasn't clear to me that we're having a meeting on the 20th. And I think that's in part due to the calendaring function that's in the emails that come out. So the actual information wasn't in the text of the email. It was only in the calendaring function. And so I wasn't aware that that's what was happening. I just assumed that it was the meeting in July with the,
Because that came out relatively the same time.
Yeah, okay. So
all right, well,
that clarification, if we can have that information in the email as well as the calendaring function.
Understood.
Okay, well, thanks for letting us know.
Yeah, that should be the updates from staff. Sorry.
The potential.
Mm-hmm.
So you think it will, what are the chances?
I would probably say 90 to 95% yes. They're both very minor issues that they should be able to address, even if they give me confidence that,
okay,
they'll have the information before the packet. We'll go for it. But sometimes to make sure people actually submit things, you sometimes, withhold the notice as long as possible to try to encourage those submittals.
And those would be public hearings, so it really is important that we know if commissioners can be available that evening.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks. Lisa, did you have anything?
I do not.
All right. Reports from Council Liaison 1. You have anything to report?
Yeah, just a few things, and I'll make it brief. Eric came to our workshop and briefly discussed the North High site. Parking was a concern amongst council, as I had anticipated, and we will have further discussions, I imagine, on that point. But otherwise, we really didn't have much time before the actual council meeting. The other update was in regards to the Coeurn Elementary updates on the parking lot there. That seemed pretty favorable overall, generally speaking. I think it would help alleviate some of the conflict with some of the on-street parking issues. So it was, I think, overall a welcome change. Another note is that the Design and Review Committee will be likely disbanded here soon, and some of those responsibilities will be integrated into the Planning Commission. There was just a lot of redundancy and repetitiveness, and so it was on hiatus for a while. So it just made more sense to integrate it back to the roles of the Planning Commission. And I just wanted to quick follow up on Commissioner Geldman had mentioned any updates regarding Highway 36 and 120. Senator Weiger and Leon Lilly have been engaged, and Senator Weiger actually put forth a bonding bill, SF 2477, for the construction of that interchange. So there's a hearing, or it's been proposed. There's not been any other updates other than that. And then that's pretty much it. Thank you all for your work. And
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Chair Barton, can I add on to one of Councilmember Wong's comments? So North High School, the school district actually requested that their review be tabled or removed from the agenda, of the council meeting. They have not withdrawn the application. We've given them the extension letter to do the full 120-day review, and we're just unsure when it will be, which council meeting it will be on in the future. So again, it wasn't reviewed at the regular meeting at the request of the school district, but they have not withdrawn the application. It's just essentially tabled at this point.
Well, I'm not surprised parking, the whole transportation becomes an issue, whether it's parking or biking or walking. So that's not surprising.
Mm-hmm.
But better, I'm kind of surprised the school district.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to read into all the reasons. There's multiple reasons. One of them is consistently across the Twin Cities, and I'd almost say across the nation, bids are coming in higher than what the estimates are, and they're bidding multiple school projects. So I can't say that's the only reason they decided, but they have a lot of things moving. And everybody consistently is getting higher bids than they expected. So they just decided to table it and kind of see where all the pieces of all the work they're doing falls.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. Any reports from commissioners? Rick?
Nothing to report.
Hey. John?
I do. I took my bride out for a little ride in the car to get her out of the house a little bit, and I drove by the 6th Street, 7th Street development over there that they're doing for the one-level townhouses. I thought, man, that's not much land, but when they got all the trees down and they're starting on the sewers, that's a lot bigger than I thought it was. So they're really working hard on it. It's gonna be nice. So that was good. And I'd also like to thank everybody who reached out to me after my son's passing of COVID. So I appreciate that. I want to thank you for that too.
Okay. Thanks, John. Eric?
Let's see. I just had a quick question. I saw in the minutes from last meeting, there was chat about emails, like planning commissioner emails. Was there any movement on that in the last month?
What I can tell you is that we have been having meetings with potentially moving from Microsoft products to Google, which would change. We would not be using Outlook for email anymore. So everything's kind of in the works right now.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. And sorry to hear that, John. That's really tough.
Yes, my condolences go to you. I'm just speechless. Sending big air hugs.
Thank you. I'm glad my wife's okay. I thought for a while there we were going to have 2. So she was in the hospital for 12 days. So she's feeling better. So that's a blessing.
Yeah.
Andrew?
I have nothing tonight.
Okay. I just wanted to thank Lisa for including the working email link in the email that I got for this meeting. That made it a whole lot easier to connect. Sometimes those links don't work. So I appreciated that. And I guess right now we're planning for our next meeting to be 2 weeks from this evening. And I also understand there's a lot going on this weekend, what with citywide open houses and isn't it electronic recycling?
There's a citywide cleanup going on that will happen down at Public Works. It's from 8 until 1
On Saturday?
on
Yep.
Saturday.
What does that
Yes.
include?
Pretty much everything except for any hazardous wastes.
TVs and stuff like that, old monitors?
Yes.
Appliances, construction debris.
Right.
Okay. I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to get rid of a few things. So that's awesome to hear. Thank you.
I would recommend going online to look at the traffic route that they've proposed just because they want to streamline the traffic and
Okay.
they've got it outlined of what direction people need to go.
On the North St. Paul website.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good information.
Also add that there's shredding services there for free too, if that's if anyone wants to shred sensitive documentation.
Okay.
We have the big garage sale.
Yeah,
online
I've seen a
garage
lot of
sale this
those
weekend,
around
too.
today. Signs.
I did too. I noticed a lot of them. I was surprised. Is there
Yeah.
anything else going on? I thought there was something else.
I think there was something proposed for the food shelf
Oh, yeah.
on the same day on Saturday as well. So they were hoping that people could make their rounds with the public cleanup and the shredding and then go to the food shelf and donate if you can.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
I do.
That's all I had. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
For Al, I'll say motion to adjourn.
John, do I have a second?
There you
I'll
go.
second.
Second.
Second by Andrew. All those in favor say aye.
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 This one we shouldn't have to do roll call. Go ahead, Lisa.
Chair Barton,
Aye.
Commissioner Brenna,
Aye.
Commissioner Gelbman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Mungy,
Aye.
and Commissioner Wise.
Aye.
All righty, we're adjourned at 9:12. Thank you all.
Thanks.